Okay, this is Dorothy Errair, and she is currently the president of the World War II Flight Nurses Association. And today she's going to summarize her career in the nurse corps, in the flight nurse, and in the Flight Nurse Association. She's going to start with when she came in, why she came in, and just tell us just a little bit about her career.
Hello. On December the 7th, I was passing bedpans when President Roosevelt came on the radio to announce the invasion in Pearl Harbor. I knew right then I was going to join. I was 1 month from graduating from nursing school. So I knew that day, and I went on. As I graduated, I took up some advanced training. Nurses didn't have advanced classes in those days, but I lived in Detroit, and Detroit had industrial nurse training, which I took, which was emergency procedures, and it was very good. I took that, and I wrote in my application to join I would be available after the first of the year, because I'd been in nursing school for 3 Christmases. I wanted to be home for one Christmas, so I said I'd be available after the first. And promptly my orders came through dated the 2nd of January. And so there I was, green as could be. And I'm an eager beaver, so I joined in Detroit. Went to Chicago, changed trains to go down into southern Illinois at one of the early advanced training schools. The hospital had recently been constructed out of portables out in the middle of the cornfield. There were 6 nurses. We didn't have many patients, but one of my first jobs was emptying the mouse traps from when they caught the mice in the field at night, flushing them down the drains. And I was gradually getting accustomed to it when the flood came. Now the Wabash River flows right down by Vincennes, Indiana, and we were 10 miles from Vincennes in the farm field. Well, when the river came in, we stood in this bright sunshine and watched all the water coming into us. The baseball field had a building in it, and the water came to within 2 feet at the top of the building. Now, what was the building, 8 foot high? I'll just give you an idea how the water, and you could see it, the sun is shining, no rain, and here's the water coming in. It just circled the field, and in pictures, it looks like George Field was an island. We had no way in and no way out except the 2-seater planes that flew, and we had a couple of ducks that carried back and forth. The first C-47 I ever saw flew in with food. In the hospital area, everything was you were, trying to keep everybody well. We had a lot of flu cases. A couple of people got food poisoning. And then one night, I worked the night shift, and one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, the levee broke. So we had to pick up and evacuate the hospital area. And we had to take them to the center of the field, which was the highest. We had about 3 days notice that it might break. And I had people ward some of the patients and some of the ward men posted at the where they kept the clothes. Anyway, so someone could pass out their clothes so that they couldn't run around in their pajamas. And even though if they weren't completely well, they could wear their uniforms. Those that we knew we were going to transport by stretcher, we put the stretchers under the bed. Now, I never done any kind of emergency things before, so it was really, and you didn't have much help because no one else had ever done it either. But we, within 10 minutes, we evacuated 4 hospital This is still in the States. I hadn't even got to the exciting parts yet. But it was great, except we all got soaked in rain because it was pouring down that night. And in the middle of the night, we left like at 2 in the morning. By 6 o'clock, we had everybody settled. And then the roof of the building we moved them to started leaking. So we had the guys in bed with a bucket between their knees trying to catch the drips. I wish we had a camera because it was really funny. But their humor was up. And, then they said, well, when's breakfast? I said, who would have time to think about breakfast? But they all survived. And it took about 10 days for the water to go down, for everything to settle. And just as it got back to, even going to have a white uniform on again instead of running around in slacks, I got my orders to move.
Before you go on, who were your patients there?
It was all part of the advanced flying school. The boys got their wings at our place, and then they went on to other squadrons. So we had the component, for the clothing, the cooks, the bakers, the base people that they had there.
Okay.
And then we had a small hospital. We had about 4 doctors, 6 nurses. So it was kind of small, but we had a good time. Well, when we had time, we did work in spite of all the things that were going on.
Then you got orders.
And the orders were to report to Louisville. We couldn't get there. We couldn't drive out. They had ducks, and there were 3 nurses from the group being transferred to Louisville. 3 in suitcases wouldn't fit in the duck. So they got a C-47 out of Louisville to come to pick us up. And the last I saw George Field was flying away and looking down to see this little bit of stretch of land and all that water. And so that was my very first plane ride. So here I go. It's in the air evac group. It didn't dawn on me that I had never been in a plane before. It never crossed my mind. Of course, as a kid, I watched planes fly overhead. You're laying on the ground looking up at them. So I got there. And it was Derby Day. So the plane got to Louisville. It circled all around so we could see Derby Day. And I haven't missed a Derby Day since. Never been inside. But just the excitement of it. It's fun. So then we went to school. We marched to class. We marched back. We marched. I wasn't talkative enough to holler out the commands, but I was there. And I had never been, I'd been at nursing school, so naturally it's all girls. And it was just amazing. And the camaraderie, you noticed it right away. And laugh, we just had a great time. And study, but they didn't know what to teach us. They taught us Arctic survival.
So this was considered air evac school?
Air evac.
Okay, at Bowman
Field.
Okay.
And then we had tropical survival. They didn't know what to tell us. We had to learn to load and unload patients on the planes. And some of them were hefty, but we used other, men. They were the guinea pigs we traveled around with. At one point, we spent in school. They had all the things that everybody could think of emergency things, what we might find, how we might be traveling. They knew the type of plane was going to be the C-47. That's the one that was available at the time. They prepared us for Arctic survival with fur pants, jackets, hats, boots. And of course, we are in the hot Louisville summer at the time, so you imagine we didn't try on our clothes very often. we we became the first group of military women to wear pants, because there's no way you could climb the steps of the plane in a skirt, because the Army skirts were tight. So we finally got our order. We had started out in the old blues. Did you ever see the old blue jacket with the odd blue? The colors never matched. It's hard to put two blues together, but they just succeeded. Then we switched. Later on, they added more suits, the seersuckers. Did you ever see those? They were all right, but they were different. The seersuckers make a very good house dress. That's what we called them, you know. But they didn't fit very good, but they were baggy, but at least they had tight belts. But at work, we wore our blues. We had 2 pair of blue slacks, not the Air Force blue, a little different shade, because they were modeled after the RAF uniforms. So that was the Eisenhower jackets, and they had 2 pockets on the inside. Remember the pockets. And then we had 2 tops, 2 pants, 1 skirt, and 2 hats, and all in the blue with a red trim around it. Incidentally, later on, the air evac nurses were known for being very buxom. And what it was, we rolled up toilet paper in rolls, like individual amounts, and our inside jackets were stuffed with toilet paper. You know, you didn't have any other pockets. The little pockets up on the top didn't hold very much. So we all adapted. That was very logical, we thought. Never realizing we would get that designation. And it was towards the end of the war before somebody finally let out what they were all thinking, you know. But it was practical. You carried what you needed with you. Don't you think that was reasonable? Of course. But that's just the way. But we did things as we went along. When I finished, our class finished, it was right around the July 4th celebration of 43. My mother was very much against my going into service. There are men there. Well, you know, what you just... Now here I am, 22 years old. You know, so there's men, you know, I wasn't chasing anybody. I had dated very little, only because I always had my nose in a book. And so, you know, so it's a date. It just didn't bother me. But my father got enough, they didn't have gas, they had gas coupons in Detroit. And they took the Greyhound bus from Detroit down to Louisville. First time they ever traveled that far on a bus. Brought my kid sister with them. She's 10 years younger than I am. So I was 22 and she's 12. And of course she's all bug-eyed. All these uniforms. Ooh, 12-year-old. You know. And the day they got there, we were at bivouac. Some hill place in the Kentucky hills. They had slept in a tent a whole week. And I swear every rock in Kentucky was under the bed, under the bedroll we had. We had invaded, the boys from the field had made up plans at night as far as raids, and so we had a sentry around the post, and we never did get much sleep because somebody was always calling a raid, gunshots going off and all. But we survived. The meals were pretty bad, but we survived that too. And then at the end, the last day we left, we come back to Bowman Field. That was our graduation night. So then here we were, all this mud and grit that we'd been living in for a week, trying to get our hair washed so we could at least comb it up through it. Remember, no hairspray in those days. To meet my folks, I didn't want her to see me all in fatigues and scared to death. But we had our time. We had a ball. I spent more time at at the ball talking to my folks because they hadn't seen me in a while. And my kid sister was just rushed by all the boys from Fort Knox that came over, and mostly the glider boys. And oh, my 12-year-old sister was the hit of the ball. Fun stuff. And oddly enough, that's the only thing my sister remembers from my days in service. You know, she's cute. We just got settled as a group, as a squadron. Our group became the 807th. And just about the time we graduated, I got word that the only boyfriend I ever had was missing in action in CBI. And here you are, getting ready to go overseas, and you hear something like that, you know, it's pretty devastating. They never heard from him again. In fact, to this day, he's still missing in action. But you only hear of missing in action in Vietnam. The others you never hear of. I was able to follow through with it. I can't even remember what he looked like now, but you know, it was important at that time. And but even after the war, there was never any word. His buddy married my girlfriend, so I was able to keep in touch like that. So that made me a little bit edgier. So we went overseas we graduated in July. Started overseas in August. We went out through the de-embarkation of a place in New Jersey. But anyway, we left through Jersey City. We took train to New York, crossed the ferry to get on the boats. And I remember the Red Cross ladies were all passing out donuts, a big long line of donuts. And we got on board ship. I don't know what kind of it was, a troop ship. I don't think I ever saw the whole thing from the outside. But they put us in a room, and if you can imagine, pipes, and there were 4 cots coming out each side of these 2 pipes. That was 4. There were 16 of us in this little dinky room that was just about the size of that bed. It looked like
16.
But it was the gun crew room. So we had a toilet, 1 wash basin, and 16 cots. And our bedroll and our B4 bag and not a bedroll, was a B4 bag and the other big bag we carried. That was all we had, and those were stacked on the side. So then we pulled out of New York Harbor, and I remember when we passed the Statue of Liberty, there wasn't a sound on that whole ship. There was more than 10,000 troops on the ship. Everybody was so quiet. And I think everybody was saying, you know, I'm going to climb you when I get back. And I did. I got to climb her when I got back. But we, the ship went 10 minutes this way, 10 all the way across the Atlantic. There was a big convoy, and rows and rows, and we were the second in from on the left side. And every 10 minutes we changed. You can almost set your watch by the, we're turning again. There were no chairs to sit on. The only thing we could sit on when we were up on deck was the big boxes that contained the life vests. So everybody would climb up on them, and that's where we would have our talk and either meet people or your buddies. And one day, one of the days, one of the pilots came up and he said, you know, my wife's going to have a baby in a few months. You know, what's going to happen? And I said, well, when it's ready, it'll come out. You know, oh, no, I don't mean that. How's she going to be? You know, we wanted some. So I said, okay. So I got out a piece of paper and we drew pictures and tried to give him a little pre-maternity care information. And then he says, well, uh, they asked some really strange questions, but it was bothering him. He didn't know. He couldn't ask his buddies because they didn't know. So, and then another one of them had a new baby, and he when does it get teeth? Well, I told him about the time. And if he doesn't have a toothbrush, I said, well, he's really not going to need one yet. You know, these things these guys were thinking about and didn't have anybody to ask and didn't want to ask their buddies, even those that had children. So I said, okay, I'll ask what I can. No, I said, you asked me a question, I don't know the answer. One of our doctors in our squadron was a pediatrician. So Captain Simpson got involved. Nobody had any place to go, you know, so we were all around. So when I got questions I didn't ask, he'd come over. And they just fired questions at him. No end. So they were technically going to school, even though they didn't get any points for it, you know, but they were learning. And Dr. Simpson was learning to teach too. Certainly I was learning. But it took up a lot of our time. You could worry, like if there was a possibility of a sub around, the destroyers were circling around, dropping the ash cans off the back, you know. And certainly it's disconcerting to see those things going and thinking about what might be down there. But we really didn't have it. It was one of the largest convoys ever at that time. So that was mid-43. But one time someone died on the ship next to us from what, I don't know, but he was buried at sea. So here we are all watching while the burial, they played taps and everybody we're all at attention, and you see the canvas bag go over the side, you know. It wasn't very pleasant to watch, but at least you knew what happened to him. And I never found out, you know, who, what, when, what happened. I don't know. But eventually we got across to, when we went through the Straits of Gibraltar. On maps, it looks a little near a strip of water. But when you're going through it, you don't see land on either side, you know. So we were in the Mediterranean. I remember the beautiful colors. Some parts of the Mediterranean is about the color of your ship. Oh, it is a brilliant blue, especially in the sunshine. So we got to Algiers. Oh, we had practiced abandoned ship drill off Lebanon, but we had a big one just off the coast of Algiers. And we were in the gun crew room. So the bells went off in our room first. So naturally you're awake. One of the girls says, I can't go. My shoes don't match. I can't abandon ship, you know. Another one couldn't find her lipstick. One of the boys next door, two fellas, they each had a leg in the same jumpsuit. It's mine, no, it's mine. But the funny thing about that was our chief nurse, who was the oldest, we were like 22 to 28 or 29. We were all in our 20s. Teach was, I think, about 32, so she was the senior one. And she was never on time for anything in her life. But that night, she and another head nurse had a bunk with two beds. She had been in bed when the alarm went off. She was up and dressed in full uniform and sitting in the lifeboat when the gun crew got on board. And they were running around in their shorts. We have never figured out how she got dressed up in complete uniform. Tie, everything. Oh, that was one of the big questions we every once in a while we'd think about it. Who dressed each? Because she was one, she couldn't find this or she couldn't find, she had her own room usually. But she was always kind of in something she was real sharp at, but who dressed her, we never knew. when we got off at Bizerti. Now, Bizerti was just a shell of a place. The first shell place I had ever seen. Just parts of buildings standing. Saw no people. Bizerti, there's a cove. Tunis is over here, but we went into the harbor, and near the harbor, and that's where we got off the big tube carrier. Then we had to get on LSDs. Those are fun to ride in. Can't see where you're going.
What are LSDs?
The landing craft, the flat ones, the sides are up and the end comes up, so you can't see over. You're all just standing. You can't see where you're going. And then took us over to the other side. Might have taken half an hour, 45 minutes to get there. So then we unloaded. And it was crowded. There were 25 nurses in one tent and 10,000 troops around us. And so we were trying to get settled. The boys at least put up the tents for us. And it was, we were all trying to get settled, so we had our cots, so we had open mosquito netting to put around. So we were trying to get all assembled. And just about the time we found something to eat, the air raid sirens went off. The Germans were flying, dropping bombs around us. We were just sitting down in this big open field to watch a movie. They couldn't show movies at night, but they could show them later in the day. And they had a screen like up against some trees, so you could, it was something. Anyway, we just got started, and we were all, of course, sitting on the ground. So we got up and ran back into the trees, and I don't know who was with me, one of the girls, and I heard some men, ladies, ladies, ladies. You know, first place that you wondered who was, and here was a British captain, and there was a bomb shelter made in a tree, and it was a hollowed out tree, so it must have been, I don't know, snipers, or I don't know who was there, but anyway, he called us in there for some protection, and it was only big enough for, let's see, there was 2 nurses, it was the 3 people, it made it pretty crowded. And then he pops out the bottle of wine, and we sat on my first bottle, we were drinking wine. We didn't have any glasses, we just kept passing the bottle around. And that was my first bomb shelter. But you know, all these different things, you know, from, sure, there was only 2 children, and went to school, and just such a quiet upbringing in school. I never talked, believe me or not. They couldn't get me to open my mouth in school. See, now they can't shut me up. But it's just the way it was, you know. And then to suddenly be in this position of all of these things happening. Oh, it was like magic, because what next? What's going to happen next? So we moved into Tunis in a villa. The villa had not been used for quite some time. We had rooms to open up our things. Of course, air conditioning didn't exist, and temperature about 120 in the daytime. But we were managing, except for one great big problem. The plumbing didn't work. Well, I got busy with a shovel, and we found out where the obstruction was. And heaven knows how long it had not worked. Anyway, we got the pipes all cleaned out here. And pretty soon everything flushed, and all it was just a plug pipe, you know. So that was one of my first jobs when we landed in North Africa, was to get the plumbing working. And only because my father was one of these curious people, and one of his favorite magazines was Popular Mechanic. Did you ever read it? And he would go through it, and I would go through it. You'd be surprised how much you can pick up. We had no other magazines in the house, and I read everything in sight. So at least I had a little idea of the plumbing problems, you know. So we were there for a month. No patients yet, because we weren't associated with any hospitals. I don't know where our doctors were. We never saw them after we got off the ship. So we were all set to move to Sicily. You know, if you look at where North Africa is, Sicily was just the island just north of where we were. The day before they moved, some bug hit me and I'm hauled off to the hospital with high fever. I vaguely remember going there. But they left me. I had one little small bag with me. I didn't even have extra clothes because they took all my extra things with me. I think they left me a toothbrush and a lipstick was about what I had in my purse. But anyway, it was 2 or 3 days. They were pumping me with all kinds of medicine. Remember, we didn't have penicillin yet. See, it was some of the other stuff that was just before penicillin. It was all pills. So here they were forcing liquids on me and forcing pills. And it was like the 3rd day. I finally got my temp down. And I woke up in the morning and I thought, boy, I had the strangest dream last night. So I went out to check the night nurse. And I said, did I have some visitors during the night? Oh, yes. Are you ready to go for your flight? You know, what flight? Well, it seemed they had an American pilot who had crash landed on the island of Sardinia and was in an Italian hospital. Italy had just surrendered. September the 3rd was the day Italy surrendered, and so but they still had bases all around. And I didn't even know where Sardinia was. You know, so finally somebody gave me an idea. And during the night, I said, well, yes, I'll go. I figured air evac first time. Well, I'd certainly been to school enough. Nobody told me very much because nobody knew very much. I'm game, except I forgot one thing. I had 3 days of forced fluids. Well, I tried to find a John before I got on the plane. No Johns, open slit trenches. It's awfully hard to aim at a slit trench wearing slacks. Well, I was too embarrassed, so I'll wait till the next one goes down. So it was about a 2-hour flight from Tunis up to Sardinia, very up the tip of Sardinia. Well, we got there. It was an Italian base. They had a full corps of planes. You know, with everything was grounded. It stopped on account of they surrendered. And I remember getting out. I had checked the plane out, and there was no John in the back of the C-47s. Most of them didn't have any. Once in a blue moon, you find. So we go in, and the Italian colonel, he comes up, he's bowing to me. He didn't pay any attention to the captain and the rest of the crew, you know. I'm the lone second lieutenant, but, he's very, a woman. You must stay for lunch. We finally figured out the communication. And here, there's this big table, and it was all very nicely set. And bottles of wine, glasses, all kinds of liquids. You know, while I looked all around, we finally got somebody that understood American, you know, is there a bathroom? Oh, yeah, I come in here, long slit trenches. That's all there was, you know. Well, I wasn't that eager. So anyway, I kept thinking, well, I told her, of course, did you ever have to go for a long time when you get your hands to hurt? Oh, man, I'm holding my fist. I wouldn't eat anything. I wouldn't drink anything. And the colonel sat right next to me. He put me at his right, you know. I'm the honored guest. Well, the captain that flew the plane was sitting across from me. And I kept saying, don't laugh, you know, because he was just getting such a big bang out of this. So I kept, my hands hurt. You know. No, I'm not hungry, thank you. No, thank you. No vino. And the crew, the dickens, I was facing them with the Italians behind me. I'm trying to be very nonchalant about the whole thing. And my hands hurt. I was starting to hurt all over. And the meal lasted about an hour. Oh, you know. So finally, the patient was at a nearby hospital, and we were eating while they were bringing him down the mountain. So I finally got over, and he was put up in the plane, and he was in pretty good shape. They amputated his leg, but he was, no particular pain. He was comfortable. So I got him settled as best I could, but I was completely miserable. And so while we started flying back, and I kept thinking, 2 hours more, I'm gonna bust, But finally the crew chief saved my life, because when he was off, while we were eating with the Italian, he found a pail and some paper, and he made a little curtain, or I don't think it was a bag of some kind. He hung over the door. Finally, he's gone. He put me in the back. Like, oh, I would bust. You're not hurt, you're not wounded, but you sure can't work under those circumstances, Oh, but I was completely drained. And I'm glad the patient did good. The patient was much better than I was, all the way back. Oh, and I try not to let the patient know what was wrong with me, but the crew I was on the plane knew, and they just kept laughing. Don't you dare laugh. You're going to be in this position someday, But it was so that was my first air vector. And when I finally, then I left the hospital that next morning. I had to go back to Korea at the hospital, and they turned me loose. Do you know what, by now we both know what travel orders are. Okay. I was turned out of the hospital in Tunis. No travel orders. I had my ID, that's about all. And I said, well, they've all transferred to Sicily. So I hitched a ride in a British ambulance that came along to the airfield. I got to El Wayne and looked around, tried to find some C-47s. Finally found some. They were noisy, and I didn't know what the other planes were even, except looking at charts, But we didn't have great many planes around, B-24s was the big ones. Occasionally you'd see a 17, and there was probably more C-47s than anything else, because it was troop carrier. Everything was moving.
So nobody really knew where you were?
Nobody knew where I was. Nobody knew me.
You were walking around trying to find...
And I found a C-47. I found some troop carriers. I found a plane going to Sicily, and I hitched a ride. Now imagine, you couldn't do that in this day and age. No. So you're going to Sicily, good. I didn't know where the nurses were. That is, what town are they in? I haven't the vaguest. So I got over into Gela, which happens to be where the invasion of Sicily took place. And I got there, and went over to base ops, and I said, you had some nurses come through here in the last couple of days? Oh, yeah, we had a bunch of... I said, do you know where they went to? Yeah, he told me they went to Catania. Can you telephone over there? Yeah. I said, well, would you call and let them know I'm here, and you do have a plane going in that direction? I'll check. So pretty soon, I hopped on a plane and went over to Catania. Gela is at the lower end of Sicily. Catania was the side closest to Italy. And so I hitched a ride again. It surprised me to be able to do that. And I look back, I had never hitchhiked a ride in my life. But when I was in service, you did as you were told. But here I am, suddenly cut loose. I'm cut loose from everybody. And half the people around don't even speak English. But that's what I did, and I got to Catania, called the base, and they sent a jeep down, picked me up, and took me to the house. And my chief nurse says, oh, so glad to see you. And then I started telling her all the things that had happened. I was the first of the squadron to even ever evac a patient. I hadn't even gotten to see the patients yet. So then I ended up on the bottom of the list as far as to go again. But that was the way I started out. And I wasn't trying to get in any trouble. I just doing what had to be done, you know? Oh, they laughed about it, but well, we had nice quarters. They were cold. I had mold all over the wall because the outside of the room, this is a villa, but there was a staircase going up the wall, and the mold was from the bricks against the bricks, and then the mold was right in the bedroom. We owned, the room where we had our cots, and my roommate and I had that one. But if you touched it, it would all come off just like snow, And it was cold in the wintertime. But that was September. It was October when we got settled over there. In the end of October is when 13 of our nurses went missing in action. I was the 14th on the list. Don't ask me how I got so close to all this. And all my life had been rather routine, and all of a sudden, things are happening. So, okay, what's next? So we settled down, and the 2nd of December was when the girls went missing. I was up and ready to go, but they had 13 nurses, 13 sergeants. We used to be a team, but the crew of the planes, that was all that one. But they didn't have enough seats for me. So at the last minute, I was scratched, so I didn't go. So the next morning, I took off where I was supposed to go. They were supposed to go partly to one base where we had 6 beds 6 cots in a room. One of our doctors was there. And then the other was Barry, which also had another one of our doctors and some of the crewmen, and also 6 cots. But 13 went up. I kept thinking, where on earth are they going to put them? They haven't got that many cots. Well, they'll figure something out. And then I got there the next day, and there was nobody. No, where's it? No one knew. So that they went missing on the 2nd, I think I was there 3rd, 4th, 5th. It was like 4 or 5 days. It was just 2 of us had gone, and we were doing all the air evac, and we couldn't figure out where they were. We would make 2 flights a day, depending on how far they were. We didn't fly at night. The fields were not lit, and everything was, the jeeps or everything they had part of the lights covered, so they only showed them down. But when we stayed, the first time we stayed in a hotel, and we had six cots in one hotel room in the downtown part of Barrie. It was a modern town. It had never any destruction, and it was nice. And see, they went missing on the 2nd of October. This was November. Missing in November, and on the 2nd of December, there were, I think, 4 of us there at Barrie, and our commanding officer said he was coming out to tell us we had some information for us. So we were going to have a meeting in our room after we went to the transit mess hall. Now, when you're traveling, your transit mess is open from here to there and nothing in between, until they're opened again. So we went over to eat, and then everybody was there, and the mess hall kind of cleared out. He says, well, we'll have our meeting here instead of going back to the room. And we had the meeting, and he told us they knew where the girls were, that they were down in Albania. Albania was in the midst of a civil war and the German occupation. The British Underground had contacted them. Have you read Albanian Escape yet? you got it. They had, and so, but the partisans had got to the girls first, and when they first saw them, they thought it was the American invasion. 13 nurses and 13 sergeants, the invasion. But they didn't know it was first Americans they had seen. So they greeted the girls, protected them, and then when they realized, you had to find somebody that could speak English to try to talk to. And we had a little bit of a few words in German and Italian that they taught us, but certainly nothing, whatever they speak, was different. But anyway, they didn't have housing for them, but they started getting them together, and with 13 men and 13 women, they put them up in different houses. This house took through 2 or 3. They didn't have beds, they slept on the floors. One of my girlfriends said she remembers sleeping with the chickens, and she said it was so disconcerting to wake up at night with a chicken crawling over your face, But they made out. Nobody had clean clothes. Going to the bathroom was a problem. You try to, if one found a place to go, then they passed the word along to everybody else. One of them wiped herself with something that turned out to be poison ivy, and she had some problems. Doing what you had to do. But remember, we had no training. No one ever mentioned anything like this. No one ever thought of the possibility of anybody being stranded. But we laughed a lot about it, But they said they were safe and they were going to try to fly in and get them. They did try. Someone from the CIA, his name was Smith, was dropped down in that area to try to help them. And I met him years later, but of course he had never done that before either. He never had that many strangers to, try to protect or try to take care of. So the Albanian people were very nice to the girls. They shared what food they had, and they didn't have enough for them, but they shared it. Agnes Jensen Mangerich, who wrote the book, the book is really very, very good reading, but when you read it, it's almost unbelievable that could happen. But during their flight and efforts to move, they had landed inland quite a bit. The plane had radio trouble. Then it had no radio. Then they had engine trouble. Anyway, they crash landed, but nobody was hurt. They just landed in a field. And they couldn't tell anybody where they were. It was foggy. We hadn't been over there very long to establish any kind of communications or secret stuff. But the British were a big help. At one point, they dropped hobnail shoes to the girls. Remember, this was winter time. They went down in October and they were there through the bad weather. And the hobnail shoes were naturally men's shoes. That's all they had. So they stuffed them full of straw or anything else. They didn't have paper. They looked for paper. Apparently the country didn't have newspapers. They had some messages would be up on the walls. That's the way they communicated. But they were doing. But the night we got the word that they were safe, we all felt that was December 2nd. Oh, such relief. They're alive, now we get them out. So instead of going back to the hotel, we went down to the theater, which was right along the bay. In the pictures that It's in Jen's book. You can see the bay. You can see all the ships in the harbor. They were setting up the 15th Air Force in Foggia, which is just north of Barry. So a lot of troop supplies and everything were coming in. Usually the harbor was dark, but because they were unloading so much and everybody was getting cocky, they left the lights on. So when the German plane that went around, we used to see him every night. It was at 5 o'clock Charlie or 5 o'clock something. We had a name for him. You see him fly over. And the motor is a different sounding than ours. So everybody knew who he was. It was just a little, I think it was, I don't even know if he had 2 engines. He might have. So nobody paid attention to him. Till just as after we finished eating, we went to the theater. All of a sudden, the ceiling fell in on us. The sirens are going off. The bombs are dropping. What do we do next? We backed away from the center. There was a whole glass ceiling on this big theater where we were watching Sonia Henney, Sun Valley Serenade. And just as she was pulling up her leg or doing something with her leg in a garter or something on, is when I still want to get that. I'm not even sure what happened to the rest of the movie because I never saw it again. But we all moved to the sides of the building because glass, smoke, and of course the sirens were loud once the ceiling was gone. And I remember standing next to this doorway and I felt it. And it was blocked, and it was about that wide. But the door that was there had moved 3 inches from the solid wall, stone block, or whatever they built on it. Well, then we always carried flashlights. Lights were not very dependable, And I had a flashlight and a whole big batch of Band-Aids. So I'm going around. Everybody got cut by the flying glass. They were minor, but I used up all of my Band-Aids. So finally we decided to walk back to the theater, to the hotel where we were staying. You've ever been to Italy? No, okay. Store fronts. Now you can imagine this was the width of the store. They have a metal roll-up door. And at night they pull the door down and there's a padlock on the floor. That's the way they lock it. When the explosions came, all those metal doors are still locked at the bottom, but out in the streets. So we were walking the streets, you couldn't find the sidewalks. We were walking on top of all these metal doors to get back to the hotel. We were like 3 blocks away. When we got back to the hotel, the 4-story building next to the hotel disappeared. All it was rubber. Just rubble, just a big pile of rubble. One wall was there, and I remember there was still a bathtub fastened to the wall with towels hanging on the bar. Explain it. There is no explanation. I don't know how many people lived in there because it was stores on the bottom and apartments, but I never did hear how many died. But there was one of the shops was a photo studio, and I had been there a few weeks before. Come on, let's have a picture taken. So I had my picture taken. And on my way to the supper that night, I had stopped and picked up my pictures, and they were in my pocket. And when I got back, entire store, just rubble, right out into both streets. So we went to our hotel, which was made of stone that, looked pretty sturdy, except the glass was gone. And we went up to marble steps, marble every place. They don't have a lot of wood, so everything's stone. Went up to the room. The windows that faced that building that no longer was there, they had a door, folded door. They had a glass door, and they had a screen. All 3 doors were lined, we had 2 or 3 cots. All these things were all laying across the cot. I had a little bag, little musette bag that I carry with extra clothes. You always carried a couple days' supply of clothes. And I had looked for the little stub for the photos, and I had pulled out my stuff and didn't put them back in. And I picked up a pair of underpants that happened to be in, and it was just shredded, just shredded. That made me mad because there's no stores over there. We only brought a certain supply with us, you know. But we got it, and then we went down. We took
Dorothy, how many more years did you serve?
This was all in the first 2 months, what I'm talking
These
about.
are only the first 2 months. And how many years did you serve
3 years.
altogether? 3 years.
So that's just an idea of what somebody
like to
goes
join.
into these things, and things keep happening.
What did you get another set of orders?
Oh, I never saw any more orders. We
You stayed there for the rest of your time in the
No,
service?
I moved. All we ever did, we moved. Our home base first was a month in Tunis. We went to Catania from October through June, so it was like a little more than 6 months. Then we moved to Rome. We were in Rome another 4 or 5 months. Then we moved to Siena for another few months. I ended up in Leghorn. But as the line moved up Italy, we were evacuating American troops and British troops. We had a British hospital. We took the American troops, like if you take them back to Rome, the American troops would go to the American hospital, the British troops to the British hospital.
Did you fly almost every day?
Just about, if the weather. Weather was always
And
the
how
problem.
many patients would be on each plane?
18 on the smaller planes, 24 on the bigger.
And
We never had any of the big, huge planes because you didn't have runways.
what was your crew like, your medical crew?
Me,
One nurse?
one nurse.
One corpsman?
But I didn't continue the night of the explosions. We found out we knew there was something wrong with the flight. That's the first night mustard gas was ever used in World War II, because a freighter, not a troop ship, but a freighter had come in with supplies for Fallujah, and one crew, officer and 2 or 3 men, had loaded 6 containers. I'm not sure the size of the containers, 6 containers